Lightspark was built on the ashes of what was Libra/DM at Meta, which I started. And the goal of Libra DM at the time was really, can we create an open protocol for money on the internet? And it was killed by the government, specifically Treasury Department and the Fed. If you can actually talk to people and stop a network from operating, that is the problem. You can't call the CEO of Bitcoin to testify in front of Congress like they did to me and Mark Zuckerberg. So the insight is really, if you're trying to build an internet for money, you have to build it on top of something that behaves like the internet. And Bitcoin is the thing. There's nothing else. That's when I really got back in, was in like 2011, like after I had dismissed it a few years before. At the time, I was running PayPal, and we had this moment where the Argentinian central bank asked us to stop basically just currency controls. The day we did that, I could see Bitcoin price go up, and I've never left Bitcoin land since then. Freedom of money is, in my opinion, absolutely a human right. But I think you need a really always present and available escape valve. And I think Bitcoin is the best invention for that ever when it comes to money.
ARCHIE.
David Marcus, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Is this your first time in Lugano?
No, it's not actually, but I haven't been in many, many years.
When did you come here, if I may ask?
I mean, I grew up, part of my childhood, I was in Switzerland. And part of my childhood, I was in Paris first, and then in Switzerland, and I grew up in Switzerland and built companies here. So I was in Lugano quite a bit.
So, okay, tell us about the languages. How many languages do you speak then?
Truly speak French and English.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Well,
a few others, but just casually, not fluent.
I mildly offended someone because I kept speaking about Lugano in the context of Italy and Italian culture. He said, well, why don't you mention the rest of Switzerland? I said, well, it's kind of a very Italian experience. I haven't actually been to the rest of Switzerland. And so I'm like, well, it just feels, we arrived in Milan and it kind of feels like an extension.
Yeah.
So no offense, but I don't I haven't experienced anything that I felt is distinctly non-Italian yet. And so I just still feel like I'm in Italy. Perhaps they don't quite like that locally,
Switzerland is Switzerland. It's a special place.
David, the reason I invited you is you've got a really fascinating startup in the space of Bitcoin infrastructure called Lightspark. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Lightspark was built on the ashes of what was Libra/DM at Meta, which I started with a team that, for the most part, is still with me here at Lightspark. And the goal of Libra DM at the time was really, can we create an open protocol for money on the internet? And at the time, we actually looked at Bitcoin and Lightning, but when you look at it from the scale of billions of people on WhatsApp and the scale of the ambition we had, it just really wasn't going to work at the time, certainly on Lightning. And so we went on and built this, it was an OG corp chain, and we can go into that later, with a stable coin on top. And it was killed by the government and the regulators at the time, specifically Treasury Department and the Fed. And so after trying to do this for a few years, the one learning is, if you're really, really trying to change the way that money moves around the world in a really profound way, you have to build it on top of something that's unassailable, truly decentralized, and truly neutral. And the only thing that in my mind fits the bill is Bitcoin. And so Lightspark is a company that builds technologies and products to make Bitcoin the open protocol for all of the money in the world, so that you can move any asset, any currency on top of Bitcoin as an open network. And so that's what we've been doing for the best part of the last 3.5 years. And now it's really starting to work. And when I mean starting to work, I mean actual US banks and European banks and Latin American banks. And while it's all over the world, building on top of the infrastructure to move from one currency and payment system to another currency and payment system, using invisible, real-time, cheap Bitcoin, traveling on the Lightning network, or now also on Spark, which is our Bitcoin L2 that we launched a few months ago, that we can go into more detail. So that's what we do. We do global money movement on top of Bitcoin. And we just had our big partner summit last week in Los Angeles. And one of the things that I said is we're Bitcoin plumbers. And what we do is basically plumbing and connecting real-time Bitcoin to all of the payment systems, to all of the money pools in the world, so that everyone can actually on and off ramp Bitcoin for real-time payments in a really seamless way, whether you're a regulated bank or you're a self-custodial wallet or you're a stablecoin issuer or you're any type of entity that needs to move money. You can actually connect on the network with minimum effort to move trillions of dollars eventually a day on top of Bitcoin for open, neutral settlement.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling. Just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money. You mentioned that the project when you were at Facebook Meta was basically the hammer came down from the Treasury Department. I don't want to get too much into the politics, but I am curious about.
I'm happy to, though.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm very happy to have that conversation.
I hold a grudge.
Yeah. Oh, good. Why did they find that a threat to the incumbent system?
Look, I was having coffee earlier with someone at the event, and that person said, whatever you do from a place like Meta that touches billions of people every month is, the minute you announce it, systemic. And systemic in the sense of, if you're a regulator, you're looking at systemic risks of the financial system. Even before you launch something, if you do something from any of these companies, you're systemic from day zero. And that's what happened to us. It's like, everyone considered this project to be a systemic risk to the financial system. And for once, all of the central bankers agreed that this thing needed to die urgently. And I tried to fight this for the best part of 2.5 years post-announcement. And we made so many concessions that it ended up being a Frankenstein of a project by the end of it. And so maybe it deserved to die for what I'm currently working on to actually deserve to exist. But I think at the end of the day, it was definitely political. It was definitely because it was coming from Facebook, which was at the time really hated by the government in place. And you had a really good coverage in the FT at some point of what happened. And clearly someone at the Fed shared the inside scoop. And apparently it was a morning meeting between Powell, who's chair of the Fed, and Secretary Yellen, who's the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, where the chair of the Fed wanted to actually let the project move forward in a small, controlled way. And apparently Janet Yellen told him, look, this is political suicide. If you let this happen, I won't have your back. And the next morning, you had the general counsel of the Fed calling all of the participating banks to tell them, look, we can't really prevent you from moving forward. But if you do, we would be very uncomfortable. And that was the end of it.
And you heard that through sort of, not directly, but in a roundabout way, it sort of came out?
So the call from the Fed to the banks, I know firsthand because those were our partners. So we knew exactly what was happening. And we know this is basically, more or less what happened. I shared this openly, because it's a story worth telling about a government or a group of governments actually coming together to stop something that would have solved money movement at massive scale. And, arguably now, knowing what I know, was probably the wrong design because, if you can actually talk to people and stop a network from operating, that is the problem. And you can't talk to anyone at Bitcoin. You can't call the CEO of Bitcoin to testify in front of Congress like they did to me and Mark Zuckerberg. And you can't do that. So you need to build on top of a foundation that's truly unassailable. And we believe that the only network that is fit for purpose to become an open money network for the whole world at the scale we have the ambition to bring transactions on is Bitcoin.
Did you ever get the feeling that it was at the behest of entrenched interests, commercial interests that government was acting on?
Well, of course, it's always easier for a bank lobby that doesn't want things to change to say, look, you can't trust this company with all of these other things. Now you're going to trust them with money. And this was an already acquired audience anyway. So it was easy for them to disrupt the change.
It's interesting that they can just stop something that could be potentially transformative and productive for the economy just, I was going to say on a whim, but I guess it was at the behest of some interests as well as a perceived risk to the system. But I guess, one of the things that always stays in my mind, and I forget the exact person who said that, the sly roundabout way around if a currency was to ever come about that would be neutral again. And I guess that was to Bitcoin's benefit at the start, the ridicule coming from the outside and eventually taking over into the system. Why do you think other Mag 7 companies have not really looked into embracing Bitcoin as an innovative technology? Do you think it was a lesson learned from Meta's experience?
Well, I think it depends. So I always need to ask the question, for what purpose? It's like, okay, what is the job to be done of embracing Bitcoin for a Mag 7 company? And what is the problem to be solved? And I think that if you look at Bitcoin, it has multiple jobs to be done. And the one we're focused on at Lightspark is really global money movement. And so from that lens, now that we've connected to the domestic payment networks of 65 countries and you can move money in real time, 24/7 at a very low cost using the Bitcoin network without even knowing you're using it, just like TCP/IP and SMTP when you send an email, and no one thinks about that. I think now is a very good time for any of these companies that want to create global money movement opportunities for their customers across their platforms to use the network. And that's a very practical way for them to use it. But I think before that, what were they going to do? Like, okay, they can buy Bitcoin and put it on their balance sheets, which many people are actually encouraging them to do and everyone else to do. That's okay. That's not our business. Like, that's maybe a good idea, maybe not. I don't know. But if you were trying to do really consumer-friendly global money movement services, for instance, like building it on top of Bitcoin before these technologies and this plumbing was actually complete, was not actually going to deliver the type of user experience that meets the bar of these types of companies. And so I think that the gap is really where our opportunity is, like between using Bitcoin on a self-custodial wallet and actually creating an experience where you can send euros to someone receiving nairas in Nigeria, or you can send dollars to someone in Mexico receiving Mexican peso in real time 24/7 on a Sunday at 1 a.m. At a very low cost.
I mean, not to invite competition for your business, but I would have thought a company like Amazon, it would just be right up their alley, massive industry changing and globally impactful. Whereas, it kind of like a financial AWS, where AWS is for information and, server. Bitcoin could have been the financial AWS for them. And on top of that, they've got this incredible global, with hopefully partnering with you guys. Yeah. But, I just would have thought that they would have seen that opportunity. It's like, hey, we're in commerce, we're in transactions, we're in this financial space, and we're in the business of building infrastructure. how can, I just would have thought they would recognize that opportunity, but it just feels like, well, not feels like, it actually is, as we see it right now, as the facts that are apparent to us, is that they're just not interested at all.
I mean, it's just like, just to steelman that, it's just like take the other side of it. It's like, if you're looking at it from their lens, like from the outside, we spend our time looking at Bitcoin and at the technology and all of the evolutions, and they're running a hyper optimized business. And when you look at like what you would need to do, for instance, what we're doing, like this is like a full-time job for my company. It's like a massive, massive amount of work to actually do what we do. And if you're looking at the effort that you need to put in to actually make Bitcoin do the things that they need to do at an hyper optimized scale, like there's just the distance between what they need and where we are or where we were before we started working on this is definitely not something that you can do if you're not singularly focused on that objective as a company. And so I think this is where we come in typically, and like because we're singularly focused on global money movement on top of Bitcoin, we can solve that problem for millions of companies around the world and for billions of people eventually that need to move money around the world. But you need to be singularly focused. And even when you are singularly focused and very well funded and all these things, it's really hard because you need to actually go and plumb Bitcoin, connect it to every payment system, make sure that if you're transacting between regulated entities, that they can meet their compliance requirements for global money transfers using Bitcoin in the middle. Hard thing to do. We just launched with SoFi, a large US bank, last week for cross-border payments for their customers. It's not easy, but you have to go methodically, do it, block by block, and eventually you get to the point where you get to escape velocity and global reach. But it's a full company focus.
Was there a particular lesson in the Libra project that pointed you towards Bitcoin, or was that a realization afterwards? And I'm interested in how that came about.
Well, I mean, we started wanting to build on Bitcoin and not being able to. And then like there were lots of sleepless nights around how do we devolve power and governance so that it's not centralized. And the answer at the time was the best we can do is bring other very large companies that will devolve basically Facebook's, Meta's power. And that was the 28 companies that formed the original Libra Association, which was like, really big companies, including the Visas and MasterCards and many others, and the Shopifys and the Spotifys and the Ubers. And, it was like all good companies that really wanted to completely change the way that money moved. And they had an angle with their own business on how that would play. But that didn't work because you could actually apply pressure to each of these individual companies because they care about their core business way more than they cared about the potential future upside of an open money network. And so there are all kinds of ways that you can apply pressure onto these companies to not be part of this thing or to stop it. And so the insight is really, if you want to do this, you have to build it on top of something where there's no one you can call. And I think, we're seeing now a rise of projects that emulate a little bit or that are attempting to emulate a little bit what Libra was supposed to be. And I call these corp chains because that's what they are. It's basically controlled blockchains or L1s that are meant to be controlled purely for economic reasons. But the minute they will become systemic, like they won't have like the benefit of instantly getting the backlash because they're not coming from a large company like Meta is. But the minute they become systemic for anyone in the world, they will know the exact same fate because you can pick up the phone and call someone and actually, stop transactions in a certain part of the world,
and
or
we've seen
stop
that
the
happen
entire
already.
network.
Yeah, we've seen that happen already.
Yes.
Various coins.
And so the insight is really, if you're trying to build an internet for money, you have to build it on top of something that behaves like the internet. And Bitcoin is the thing. There's nothing else.
The realization you want to build something on Bitcoin, what did you assess and how did you come to the conclusion that Lightning was what you wanted to build on?
So the first thing that you need to do if you want to compete in global payments is to ensure that the asset that is moving the value, or the settlement asset, is moving on top of a network at a speed that is comparable to closed networks. And so, of course, Bitcoin L1 wasn't going to cut it by any stretch of imagination. And so at the time when we got started, Lightning was really the only game in town. And we went to work to make Lightning more enterprise grade. I remember vividly that 3.5 years ago, when we started this journey, about 50% of transactions above $50 on a Lightning network would fail because it couldn't find the right path on the network with the proper channel liquidity, and would fail. And so that obviously wasn't going to cut it. So we put an immense amount of work to make Lightning better, to make it more reliable, to enable large enterprises like the Coinbases of this world, et cetera, to use it. And I think we've done a really good job at that. But then we came to the conclusion that Lightning was really great between custodial entities. So if you're bringing banks onto the network, if you're enabling transactions between custodians, it's great because you benefit from privacy, you benefit from a lot of scalability, and you can configure the channels in such a way that it works really, really well. But what we've realized is that it was just not going to work for self-custodial wallets, because you have to place liquidity in front of every single wallet, basically, which makes it economically not viable. And if you don't want that, then you need a Lightning service provider, which, you know, can at times, depending on how you look at it, be considered money transmission. So needs to be a regulated entity, and none of these are regulated. So we don't want to do that. And then for issuance of tokens and stable coins and all kinds of different assets, it doesn't work. It won't work either because of the same problem. It's like you have to have the two parties transmitting a stable coin on top of Lightning, configure channels for that stable coin. And so you create all kinds of liquidity mismatches and all kinds of complexity that is really not going to work. And so that's when we realized, okay, we actually need to do a lot of work to figure out how we extend the capabilities of Lightning. And that's where Spark was born, where we needed to really, really extend the capabilities for self-custodial wallets, extend the capabilities for stablecoins, because despite the fact that I had like my schizophrenic period with stablecoins, not knowing whether I wanted to support them or not support them, I realized you can't fight a market that actually is all about stablecoins right now. And you know, and the reason I was schizophrenic is because stablecoins by nature are fully centralized. So back to our earlier part of the conversation, you can call someone and stop a stablecoin. I know exactly who I can call for each of those stablecoins. I think USDT is in a better place. But I think generally speaking, for any of the other stablecoins that exist, you can call the CEO and say, okay, shut it down, and they can. Or freeze accounts or do all kinds of different things. And so I was a little schizophrenic about that. And I still am. And that's why I feel like, you know, when you're moving from one fiat currency to another fiat currency, using Bitcoin as a neutral settlement asset is superior to using a stable coin. But if people want to hold a stable coin in all kinds of different parts of the world, it's a better currency than their home currency to hold dollars in the form of a stable coin, even if you trust the issuer. Then if you have to do that, like, let's actually bring it on top of Bitcoin so that at least the settlement layer, the network that moves that stablecoin, is actually the most neutral open network, and you can exit the L2 in this case to Bitcoin at any given point in time if you so choose to do so. And I think that's really important. So Spark was born from the need to support stablecoins on top of Bitcoin and to support better Bitcoin wallets for everyone that wants a self-custodial wallet.
You mentioned that a lot of work had to go into the Lightning Network since you started Lightspark. Specifically, any particular areas that you think there have been big improvements on in that time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, if you're using us to connect to the Lightning Network as a large custodial player, you'll never hear the word channel. So you don't need to configure channels. You don't need to rebalance liquidity. You don't need to figure out how to route specific transactions or to split large transactions into subatomic transactions that get reassembled on the other side. We do all of that for you. And so we've done all of that so that the burden to actually get on the network is actually smaller. And now the benefit of Spark is that, like, if you're integrating Spark, you get Spark, Lightning, and L1 in one integration. So if you're a wallet that wants to just support Bitcoin, you do one Spark integration through our SDK or to partner SDK like Breeze or others, and you get the best of Bitcoin plus stablecoins plus like the all of the BTKN, which is Bitcoin token standard. So anything that supports that standard by default is going to work with your wallet, which is really why we're seeing like every day a new wallet pop out, like, of nowhere, with support for Bitcoin and Spark. And so
I just want to understand the difference from your company's perspective in how you view Lightning and Spark, because in one way in which you describe it, it sounds to me like it's an alternative and potential competitor, but also something that embraces and facilitates, enables Lightning as well.
Yes, 100%. Like, look, it extends Lightning by enabling it to exist in self-custodial wallets. And like, there's lots of debates, like, with purists around what is self-custody and what is not. And some say, look, if you don't own your own UTXO on L1 and your private key and all of that, like, private key definitely, but it's not self-custodial. I think anything that is not L1 has different trust assumptions. Anything, like, even Lightning.
Well, that's the purpose of one of the reasons why we go to different layers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To enable some kind of, I was going to say compromise, but I guess a variable.
Yeah.
And if you don't alter any of those variables on Bitcoin, then how are you going to get additional functionality?
No, exactly. So it's like, and I think this is what I think, if you ask me what is the thing that I believe we've nailed with Spark, is this actual perfect balance, in my opinion, between utility and trustlessness. And I think that's the most important thing right now. And some people will argue, no, and it's like not fully trusted, which is true. But anything else other than Bitcoin L1 has trust assumptions. So the question is, what are you willing to give up in terms of small degrees of trustlessness for max utility? And I think for the majority of people is they're fine with the compromise. Like they're not going to keep their life savings in Bitcoin on Spark. I wouldn't. But if I need to transact, hold, all kinds of different stable coins and all kinds of different assets and have money on the network for transactional purposes, totally.
So it's for a particular time, for a particular purpose, a compromise is not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Provided you can close off that window and then you still have your life savings.
And the beauty with the Spark trust assumptions, by the way, is like, you really have to be very paranoid not to trust it, because you actually, first of all, the only moments that there's any trust assumption is when you move money, not when you don't move money. So it's at the time of a transaction. And at the time of a transaction, you have to believe that the previous owner of that Bitcoin that is sent to you is actually colluding with all of the network operators, that all of them are actually behaving in a malicious way. And so, like, it takes a lot of like paranoia to believe that this is actually even remotely possible. It's a very high bar, and the trustlessness of Spark is very, very high. So you can feel good about that. I think there are different trust levels to Lightning versus Spark, etc., and L1, but I think we've hit the right balance. And the beauty with Spark is that it's not a channel-based payment system. So you're not reliant on all of the liquidity problems of a channel-based payment system. And so the beauty also with the way that we've built the SDKs and the way that we've built the network is that it's backward compatible with Lightning. So you have now Wallet of Satoshi, for instance, that is using Spark to have a self-custody wallet for the purpose of providing great consumer experience on the Lightning network. They don't advertise Spark transactions, they advertise Lightning. But it just turns out that they're using Spark.
They're using Lightning through Spark?
Correct.
And so Lightning announced the ability to, to transmit different types of assets.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of possibilities do you see for that within your business as well?
Yeah, so I don't think, look, I hope it works, but I don't think it will on Lightning. And the reason for that is just what we said before, which is that if you're transmitting a stable coin on top of Lightning, then both sides of the channel need to have the channel configured for that specific asset. Otherwise, it just won't work. So it's like, I'm not sure exactly how you're going to park liquidity specifically for specific stable coins on the network to move between channels. I'm not sure how that's going to work. For us, what we try to do is really make it very easy for issuers of all kinds of different assets to be able to issue on Bitcoin, with the benefit of unilateral exits to L1 so that you don't have to trust anyone operating the Spark network to recoup your balance on L1, including for tokens and assets and stablecoins. So if you do that, then Spark becomes really the best way to issue on top of Bitcoin. And it has a lot of other attributes for stablecoin issuers. One is you can pay fees in the stablecoin you're transmitting. Great. That by the way, no one really understands why this actually is so fundamental and so important. But if you were in the market 2 Fridays ago, when the market was starting to liquidate like crazy, the fees jumped very high, especially on Ethereum. Like you had like $300, $400 a transaction, and so you can't build a payments business on top of a network that has fees that can be 100x, like in 1 second. Like it's just like, well, how do you imagine if your Visa card transaction, you're trying to buy something at a merchant, like you're buying a sweater, and your sweater is like $50, and now like they charge you at the payment stage $200, and you're like, what? So this is not going to work for mainstream payments. So what we've done at Spark, because we're also a payments focused company, is we've built the ability for stablecoins to issue easily on top of Bitcoin. You can pay for fees in the stablecoin you're moving. You will soon have the ability to, as an issuer, configure interchange at the network level, so you can actually make transactional revenue for your stablecoin moving on a network and disperse that to merchants and others to adopt your stablecoin. So we've really built a mainstream payments network on top of Bitcoin using Spark, and we've configured it in a way that's actually really conducive to mainstream payment adoption. Because if we were going to bring stablecoins on top of Bitcoin, we just wanted to make sure that it was going to be the best place for issuers to issue and use it for this mainstream payment use case.
So one of the challenges the Lightning Network has, as you alluded to, is liquidity within channels. And so my sort of developing thesis is that these Bitcoin treasury companies are an ideal candidate to provide that liquidity, because they're accumulating a bunch of Bitcoin that's just sitting there doing not too much. And there's going to be growing, shareholder pressure to actually do something if they can. Does Spark remove the potential and ability to generate that yield?
I mean, you don't need to do that if you're using Spark.
So a few months ago, probably about 3 months ago, I think it was Jack Dorsey's block announced that they were able to, through a pilot trial, earn around about 10% yield on Bitcoin by providing liquidity in a channel. Does that now become a redundant process? It's just not necessary?
It depends how the market plays out, right? So there are different views on how Lightning evolves and the role it plays. Some say Lightning is basically going to be the lowest common denominator for real-time Bitcoin settlement.
What does that mean?
Like it means that like if you have many L2s on top of Bitcoin and you have liquidity that is like Bitcoin liquidity, or maybe tokens, but like let's focus on Bitcoin for now. You have Bitcoin liquidity that exists in different L2s for different purposes. That if you need to move liquidity between all of these L2, the common language that all of these L2s will speak is Lightning. And so you can actually net settle or move liquidity between these L2s in real time using Lightning. So it becomes the interop of all the L2s, because L1 is just too expensive, too slow. So maybe that's, the future state of Lightning if we end up in a world where you have different L2s taking share for different use cases that they're better at. And in this case, you'll have to enable that liquidity to move between these L2s, each of these L2s on Lightning, and you'll need the liquidity to do that, and you'll need the channels, and you'll need everything that you currently use on Lightning to do it. If it's not going to be that, and another L2 is actually going to take the lion's share of the volume, then maybe you don't need that. But I don't know. And I'm of the opinion that my opinion doesn't matter. It's like, people are building things, we're building things. At the end of the day, the best products will take share. Is it going to be a winner take all thing? I'm not sure. Is it going to be a very fragmented world with lots of L2s? Maybe, I don't know. We're focused on building for a specific use case and building the best possible product for payments use cases and for issuance on top of Spark. And we'll see how much share we get, over time. But I think Lightning plays a really important role in providing the connective tissue between all of these different L2s and L1.
Oh, yeah, whether or not Bitcoin must become a means of exchange has been quite a hot topic of late, especially since Jack's voiced his opinions and made his tweets. He always tends to steer the narrative on the timeline quite profoundly in some moments. But do you think it has to become a means of exchange in order for Bitcoin to survive? Do you think it's incumbent? And I'm asking someone in the Bitcoin payments business. So, I guess there might be a temptation to talk your book, but do you think it has to happen? Or you're anticipating that it simply will and you want to be a part of that?
No, I mean, look, first of all, I completely agree with Jack. I think Bitcoin needs to be in everyday payments for billions of people. And then the question is like, how? And what does that mean to be in everyday's payment? Is it that you're using the network for everyday payment, or is it that you're using the unit of account, Bitcoin, as the currency for your payments? And I think both of those things are needed for Bitcoin to fulfill its fullest potential. And so we're fully aligned on this with Jack. And I think if you look at what they've done, which is amazing, by the way, like with Square and enabling merchants to accept Bitcoin payments at zero fees, when you actually double click on Bitcoin payments, it's actually really great because they listen to what the merchants and the consumers wanted. And you can actually, as a merchant, accept payments from Bitcoin wallets, but receive your payments in dollars, or a portion in dollars and a portion in Bitcoin. And so in this case, like if you have a balance in dollars and you're converting to Bitcoin in 1 second to make a transaction at zero fee for that merchant's receiving money in dollars, is it everyday Bitcoin? I say yes, it is. It absolutely is. And so for me, this whole idea of making Bitcoin everyday money, it lives on a continuum of using the network, because building on top of the network where you can exchange into the fiat currency you want at the edges, etc., is still using Bitcoin for everyday payments. And in some cases, gradually, more and more people, more and more merchants will actually want to have smaller amounts of Bitcoin because they'll see the value in holding Bitcoin that will appreciate over time as a tool for them to grow their businesses, grow their net worth. And I think this is the way. And so in some parts of the world, it's going to be people just using Bitcoin. In some other parts of the world, it's going to be one person in a two-person transaction is using Bitcoin, the other person is receiving something else. In some cases, it's going to be two people or businesses using fiat currencies at both edges, but using Bitcoin, the network, for a transaction. And that's also a way to make Bitcoin part of everyday transactions.
I mean, I can see the profound changes. Let's talk adoption because, most of the narrative is driven by number go up, right? And I was brought in because of number go up. Most of us, we have to confess that we were brought into Bitcoin because of number go up. It's a compelling narrative. But and as a result of that, we look at the moment for the last 12 or 18 months, certainly since the ETFs have been approved, the story is one of who's making an allocation in the institutional side of the economy. But I'm interested to hear more about adoption from the payment side, some of the customers you're working for, because essentially you provide B2B not software infrastructure for Bitcoin. So can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, the adoption trends that you're seeing, who's showing interest in implementing, what kind of businesses and which types of end customers are they servicing? What's happening in those areas that these companies are actually embracing Bitcoin payments?
Yeah. So let me break it down into pieces. This is all about Bitcoin payments, and we enable all kinds of different types of money movement on top of Bitcoin. So let me break it down. So the first part is enabling regulated financial institutions to use Bitcoin, the network, to move money in real time across currencies, banking and payment systems, countries, and more. So on this front, things are going insanely well. So we just brought in SoFi, the first US bank, which in itself is when you think about what it takes to bring a US regulated bank onto using Bitcoin for transactions at the consumer level and expose that to their millions of customers, it's a huge deal. And so SoFi is live and they've launched last week. But we also have Nubank that has been building on top of the network. And
that's the Brazilian company.
They operate in Brazil and in Colombia and in Mexico. And so they're leaning in hard on building on top of this as well. We announced bringing Revolut on earlier this year. We announced a number of other banks and financial institutions all over the world. And so this idea that you can actually remove the current payment system that is not real time, that takes 3 days to settle, that is expensive, with a real-time payment system that's built on top of Bitcoin for the purpose of fiat transactions powered by Bitcoin, is really taking hold and is taking off. And we're seeing it in volumes, we're seeing it in adoption, we're seeing it in a number of banks that are currently implementing as well. So that's going really, really well.
What are the incumbent systems they're replacing with your services?
I mean, it's Swift and correspondent banking, right? Swift is just a messaging piece, so just put that aside, but it's correspondent banking that doesn't work Friday after 5 p.m. That costs $45 to $50 per transaction, that no one except if you're a bank has access to, and is older than I am.
It's hard to believe the world is still at that level. The banks are still at that level. HSBC in the UK is at 4 p.m. it closes. Well, at least for my account, I'm not important enough for extended services, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. Well, the fact that there's such a concept as extended services for your best customers is says it all, right? So anyways, that stuff is really, really going very, very well. Then there's Spark, where we've launched to mainnet and mainnet beta 6 months ago. And on that, I'm just beyond happy. It's the developer energy and the builder energy on top of Spark is insane. It's literally every day I open X and there's someone that has launched a new wallet or
Tell us
bridge
about some products that have been launched that excite you.
So first of all, the wallets. So in the wallet space, we really have Wallet of Satoshi that has made a big comeback in the US using Spark. You have Xverse that has implemented Spark and is using it for all the Bitcoin DeFi stuff and is doing really amazing product work there. We have WDK, so Tether, is launching or has launched now the wallet development kit that will power the Rumble wallet and others. And it has Spark inside, which is
Rumble,
huge for us.
the YouTube rival sort of
exactly.
video player. Okay. Yep. Gotcha.
So that's massive for us, and also a great way to work more closely with Tether that we really admire and want to do more things with. So and then there's all the other tools. So you have Privy, which is a wallet platform that enables anyone to spin up a wallet and never have to see a seed phrase. You can log in with your Google or your Google Authenticator, or your Google account, your phone number, or any other login, and you can build a Spark wallet in seconds, basically. And we had Henry, the CEO of Privy, at our partner summit last week, demoing actually building a wallet for a neobank on top of Spark. You have Braille, which is like a stablecoin issuance platform that has issued USDB, the first stablecoin that they intend to have rewards in Bitcoin paid for, etc. That's like launched on top of it.
What's USDB? What is that?
It's USD Bitcoin. It's like a stablecoin for the Bitcoin network. We have Flashnet that has built like an enterprise grade AMM, so that other launchpads and playgrounds like Luminex, and there's another one, UTXO.fun. We're a payments company, by the way. We never expected this to happen, but when you build a permissionless network and you give developers and builders tools, they'll go and build whatever they want. And when you can actually issue tokens really efficiently on top of Bitcoin for the first time and tap into the Bitcoin liquidity, you have all of these, like basically the pump.fun version, like the Bitcoin version of pump.fun actually launching, and you see volumes from that happening. You had another wallet launch yesterday. Breeze has built like a Rust SDK to launch basically nodeless Lightning support. So you don't have to run a Lightning node. You don't have to manage your channels and your liquidity. You just use their SDK, and you can build a wallet in 2 seconds on top of Lightning. You have so many others. There's this really fun that I encourage you to play with, called Blitz, which is this X tipping wallet. Like that's how they started, but they're doing way more things. Okay. So I can tip you on X, like sats, like small amounts of sats.
How does that work then?
I'll tip you after the show, and you'll see it. It's
I'll take any tip.
It's really fun, and like they're building like the whole stack now. Super awesome builders, and again, every day there's like 5 more like this, and so we're seeing a lot of builder energy come back to Bitcoin. And all of these builders were not building on Bitcoin before, they tried many years ago, and then they went and built on EVMs and Solana, and now they're coming back for the first time. So I'm very happy about this.
Yeah, unfortunately, one of the worst things about running this account on Twitter is that you can't. When my DMs were open, I was constantly getting proposals to promote this, and it's like, yeah, we're doing Bitcoin, but on such and such network, and then it's also got this token. And as soon as you hear token, the word, you just shut off. And whereas what I'm hearing now, but please correct me if I'm wrong, is those people are now coming to literally build on Bitcoin now as a result of Spark. And so it seems to be absorbing quite a lot of developer energy from the broader crypto ecosystem. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yes, 100%. And so then how does it all come together? Because we talked about very different things, like the pump.fun of Bitcoin and like providing regulated bank payments, right? And so how do these things all come together? And so like the fun part with all of the activity on Spark is that it's creating so many wallets, and those wallets are now compatible with Bitcoin, with Lightning, with Spark, with stablecoins on top of Spark. And at our partner summit last week, we announced this new product called Grid, Lightspark Grid.
Lightspark Grid.
And what it does is that it actually brings together all of these capabilities that we've built over the last 3.5 years behind very, very simple APIs. And so you as a developer can use Grid and have Bitcoin as like the way you integrate, or have a stablecoin as the way you integrate, or have fiat accounts. And it's basically, you deposit dollars or euros into your Grid account. And now what can you do? You can send money from that account to any of the endpoints that are banks or accounts on the network. So 65 countries with real-time payment systems, 24/7, super low cost. You can send from dollars to Bitcoin on a Spark wallet in 1 second, and you can spin up these wallets in real time. You can send from that fiat account to a stablecoin on any of these wallets in real time, or receive from any of these endpoints. So we've basically API'd the network and all of the capabilities that we have on the regulated side with banks and wallets and regulated entities, all the way to the self-custodial wallet able to receive Bitcoin and stable coins. And it's all come together under the roof of that one entry point.
I mean, that sounds incredible. Have you just built the iOS
really
for Bitcoin? Because what you've described sounds like an operating system with an app store attached. I mean, you might have seen, I guess, a puzzled look on my face because it was, part impressed and part, am I understanding this correctly? It sounds like you've built the iOS of, I mean, is that analogous to what you've just described?
I mean, the difference is, with iOS, you have to talk to someone to actually issue your app on the App Store. In our case, we don't ever mean to be that gatekeeper or have that kind of power. But we basically built a series, and I said it, early in our conversation, we're Bitcoin plumbers, right? So we've built amazing plumbing for Bitcoin. We've built amazing sets of technologies to make Bitcoin more powerful, move faster, cheaper, support all kinds of asset types and tokens and stable coins. And now we've created simple APIs that developers and builders can actually use to use Bitcoin for global money movements in ways that really weren't possible until now. And so in a way we've done that, but iOS, I see,
it's not a like for like analogy, but I'm trying to,
did we build an operating system for Bitcoin for money movement? Maybe that's a good way to say it.
So I know there are people out there, because, I've had my finger on the pulse for the last 5 years. And immediately, I zoom 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, and you guys just dominate the ecosystem. Yeah, you've developed an infrastructure so compelling that everyone just builds on it. Is it going to be too concentrated? And I know from your point of view is, well, like, if no one can compete with us, why shouldn't we win all that market share, right?
No,
but I guess if we just sort of step back a little bit and just say from a Bitcoin health point of view.
No, I completely agree with that worry. And I like, look, a part of me, like a rational capitalist, thinks it's like a great thing if we can win it all. But also I've been there, and I don't like, building on Bitcoin is hard. It's way harder than building on anything else. And if we had done all of this for the purpose of actually building a giant centralized thing on top of it, like, why would we
But I don't mean for the purpose of that, but just by sheer coincidence and perhaps, excellence and being first in the market. And the fact that, like you said, it's really hard to build on Bitcoin.
Yep.
You see what I mean?
So no, totally. I totally see what you mean. But like, I'm saying, like, my point and my objective, at least, as far as I'm concerned personally, is to build something that is really like to make Bitcoin the internet of money. And so we're building the tools and the capabilities in order to do that. And I often tell the team, look, we're not successful if we don't have head-on competition for the exact thing we're building. And this is why we've open sourced everything. Right? So Spark is open sourced, like UMA, like universal money address that is used by all these banks, open sourced. Like all of the stuff that we've built is open source. We make contribution to the Bitcoin open source ecosystem as well. And we want to encourage like baby Lightsparks and others to actually get built on top of the technology we've built so that you have a choice of providers. And by the way, the beauty with the network here is that, I'm a huge fan of the incentive system that was baked into Bitcoin from day one. Huge fan. And the incentive here is actually that, like, fast forward 10 years. Fast forward 10 years, no one will need any of these tools that we've created. No one. So we're creating ephemeral tools for the purpose of delivering the value of Bitcoin today. But if you fast forward 10 years from now, no one will need these tools. Why? Because the banks will connect natively onto Bitcoin, the same way that Nubank has done. Nubank is connected natively onto Bitcoin because they can convert in and out of Bitcoin easily from Brazilian reais to Bitcoin and then use the Lightning network. They've done the work. And everyone will want to do that because it'll be the cheapest way to get on the network and send and receive transactions. At which point, all of the stuff that we've built for interoperability with the domestic payment systems, etc., becomes completely irrelevant. But we need to get all of these banks there. And if you ask all the banks in the world and all of the market participants to connect natively onto Bitcoin, to do the conversion, to connect on Lightning or Spark, like it'll never work, right? You'll never get to escape, like the network escape velocity that you need. And so this is the way that we become, over time, not a single point of failure, is by actually successfully bringing so many market participants onto Bitcoin that then the incentives push them to connect natively. And I'm sure we'll provide them services to do that and we'll be fine. But the bottom line is, I don't think we're going to build a giant like central hub where everything is going to be connected, because the incentive to go native is going to be so much greater than the entropy of not.
One of the virtues of Bitcoin is permissionless. If someone builds on top of Spark, is David Marcus the guy the administration calls to say,
no, Spark is fully permissionless.
It is permissionless.
Fully permissionless. So you can build whatever you want on it. We have no opinions and no ways to actually stop you from building it. Which is why I said what I said earlier, which is like, we're not like a meme coin factory by any stretch of imagination. I'm like the last meme coin guy. But it's fun to see the whole, fun coin, meme coin ecosystem being built on top of Bitcoin, on top of Spark, even despite us, right? It's just like we've offered the basic primitives and capabilities to builders, and they want to tap into Bitcoin liquidity. They're going at it, and they're not calling me to ask me or the team whether they can or cannot do this. They're just building away.
You mentioned that there is an appetite from the banking sector, particularly the first bank that you said, SoFi, has come on board.
First US bank. We had other non-US banks.
And is there an appetite from some of the large e-commerce providers?
I mean, I think it's a chicken and egg thing. So e-commerce will be massively interested when they can receive payments from hundreds of millions of consumers wanting to buy their stuff. I think, we focused first on consumers, like so banks and wallets, where we can reach enough consumers. So then we can move on to commerce players that will want to receive payments from these consumers. But it's a prerequisite to have lots of consumers.
What sort of assets do you think will find product market fit on top of Spark?
So, I mean, stable coins, for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of really interesting things. I think Bitcoin is kind of unique in many ways. And I believe that if people truly understand the value of building on top of a truly neutral network that no one controls, so you're not, basically king making a corp chain, and then you become captive and victim of your creation, which happens a lot in financial services. When you look at all of the payment schemes, like they started open. Like the early days of Visa, it was an association, a non-for-profit association with member banks, right? That's like not where we are today. But I think that like at the end of the day, anyone wanting to issue on top of a decentralized network with the ability to exit to L1, have that guarantee that you can get your balance out at any given point in time, will want to build it. And so, tokenized money market funds, tokenized real world assets, tokenized stocks. Over time, I think, again, like this was not our focus. Our focus was singularly on payments. And that's why we've built Spark in the way that we've built Spark. But it turns out that if you're building a world-class network for stablecoins with very low guaranteed fees, predictable, you can pay the fees in the asset you're transmitting. You can do you can have unilateral exits to L1. It's actually a great platform for all kinds of other tokenized assets.
So I always thought that when TradFi came to Bitcoin, came even to the broader crypto space, and especially I thought they would embrace the application of stable coins. I always thought they would develop their own. And in my mind, I do recall announcing in the news that there was a consortium of US banks who were in fact going to do that and build their own blockchain, so to speak. Is what Spark is building obviating the need for them to do that, and then they can just issue it using your infrastructure? Have you seen an appetite for that to happen?
Yeah, I think eventually we will. I think, Spark is early, right? It's like 6 months old since mainnet beta. And I think, for some of these players, they need to see the network operating, process a pretty significant amount of volume, like get assurances that this is a network that they can feel comfortable building on. And so we're having some of these conversations, but I think we're so early. Like someone was making fun of me because I was someone at another company also building on Bitcoin that shall not be named, but a very good person. I was like basically complaining about the time it's taking for us to get Spark to mainstream and all of that. He's like, dude, like you've just got started. This is building a protocol, and a protocol take years to actually get to, and I have no patience. Like, so it's like, we're not going to wait for 7 years for this thing to actually become mainstream and being used. We need it now. And so I have this built-in impatience, and like the other side of me also needs to contend with the realities of building a tested, hardened protocol for real world money applications on top of Bitcoin. And that takes trial and error and time, and takes a lot of adversarial events happening, like people trying to steal funds from the network and all kinds of different things, which we're seeing now. And so it's a good thing. Like the process of hardening a network is good, and we've done so much of that in the last 6 months. So much.
You're an incredibly accomplished guy in the corporate space. PayPal president and Meta. We've spoken about, and I'm curious about things like cultural change in the corporate space. How have you perceived it? Because you've been in the payments business for quite a long time now. How have you perceived the change in corporate culture when it comes to discussion around Bitcoin in general, but also, Bitcoin payments, crypto payments, and the like?
I mean, look, the nice thing with Bitcoin, which is great, like, when we were doing Libra, we always had to go and convince people this is great. Like, this is going to solve all of these problems. You should join us. And then it was like, okay, now let me break it down for you and let's go into the details of why. Bitcoin, there's always at least one Bitcoiner in any organization you're pitching. And you can even see it in the body language of meetings. Like you're in a meeting with like very serious everywhere. We're everywhere. And it's so great because you can see it. It's like they're excited and they're a Bitcoiner. And that's like a massive advantage. It's like, you go into these companies, always Bitcoiners in there. And they spent the time to study it, understand it. They're coming at it with a perspective. But I think from a corporate world or more generally from a regulated business standpoint, like times have changed in such a profound way. And I think when you see massive success coming from the ETFs that are coming from the world's largest financial institutions, you cannot say this is a rogue thing used for crime anymore. That doesn't fly. So it's like, the number of attacks on Bitcoin, the narrative attacks and FUD on Bitcoin, like this was one of them. The other one was like energy. It's going to eat all the energy of the world. And now that it's AI, no one cares anymore. It's fine, whatever.
Do you think the corporate risk has been eliminated? The career risk within corporations has been eliminated?
I think they're running out of objections. Like, it's like, okay, you said it was going to be very bad for the environment. Turns out it's actually the really greatest accelerant for renewable energy. You said it's only criminals, but it turns out it's actually much better than the existing financial system at stopping financial crime. You said that it was just a Ponzi scheme and that it was going to just blow up. No, not happening. You're saying it has, like recently from the ECB, that it has no intrinsic value, that gold has intrinsic value. You're like, okay, what's the intrinsic value when you can make more of it when the market demand goes up? Like, I'm not sure. Like, so I think you're running out of objections. And I think people now see the utility. The problem also was you had an objection and then you had no business being in Bitcoin. So you had no reason to actually root for it, right? And now that you have practical applications where you can use Bitcoin for global money movement, cheaper, faster, 24/7, you can issue stablecoins on top of it, you can do all of these things. You have business reasons to care about Bitcoin, which is also super important. So the tools we're building are also creating great business opportunities for other businesses to want to adopt Bitcoin. And that's an important subset of our modest contributions to the ecosystem, but it's working. And that's how we get US banks to start using Bitcoin for global payments, which is amazing.
I remember my first experience with I've got a sort of very modest banking career. Was the start of my corporate career as a graduate, and we had to work on a project and then present to like a board of sorts to get approval.
I can picture you in the banking environment.
Yeah, it was a lot of pain. It was a lot of pain for me. So that's where I started off, and we worked on this idea. And one of our graduate cohort, he had the idea, and this was before PayPal, right? Mm-hmm. Let's work on eCash that is transmitted by email. It's like a code that you can redeem and blah, blah, blah. And like, back then it was like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. So we worked on this and presented it. And just the reaction we got from the executive class, just for, back then it was a really novel kind of application, right? Uh-huh. And as far as I understand, like PayPal was kind of conceived as a sort of like an email transmission thing, right? And then it developed later on. And they just looked at us like we were idiots, right? And then not even 4 years later, I think, when did PayPal exit to eBay? Which year was that?
I think the IPO was 2000 or something like that, and then the acquisition was probably a year or two later, I think.
Oh, okay,
but I'm not sure.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, all right. So I'm getting my timelines a little.
Or
bit
maybe it was like 2009. I don't know. It was definitely not 2009. It's like I joined in 2011, and it had been part of eBay for years at that.
Okay, I'm getting my time because we definitely did this early 2002. Mm-hmm. They looked at us like we were absolute idiots, and then ever since then, you just have a look at how the mainstream corporate media, particularly the financial press, has dealt with Bitcoin as well, and it was exactly like the same kind of attitude, totally dismissive.
Yep.
And now, like, we've got Larry. Mm-hmm. Larry's a Bitcoin maxi, right? Larry Fink from BlackRock. And it seems like finally the corporate culture has got approval to at least start considering Bitcoin. And I was interested in, the reason why I asked you the question about culture is, did you have a perception that, oh, this is now changing? I can feel it changing. Was 100%. There a moment in time that happened? What was the catalyst for that?
No, I mean, look, I think the ETFs were a big turning point. Yeah. It's like you have Fidelity and BlackRock, and then it becomes the most successful ETFs of history. And so suddenly everyone's like, oh, we can make money with this thing. Like, I also feel like, the problem with Bitcoin is you've had cohorts of people. Like you have people who had colleagues bet on Bitcoin, and these people thought they were crazy. And then the crazies got rich and they didn't. And so they wanted this thing to die because otherwise, for themselves, for their own self-worth, they would look like fools.
We were just talking about resentment being a huge driver.
Oh, it's like a huge thing.
Yeah.
But the problem is, then they are like, they missed the first like 10 years, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then they resent, and then like they missed the next 5 years. And then they're even more resentful because they're like, you've been an idiot twice, right? and so, but at some point you just realize that, okay, like I was wrong, and this thing is actually taking off, and you should get on the bandwagon, like whether you own it or not. It's like, you can use it as a technology to advance humanity in a whole variety of ways, because unlocking money movement is massive for humanity. And so I think they're running out of objections. And I think that, if you look at the adoption curve of Bitcoin, it's still early, I think, but like on a very, very fast growth trajectory. So I think we're going to be just fine.
I think so. Your personal journey into Bitcoin started when? Did it precede your involvement at Libra?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I have to give credit to my very good friend Wences Cazares, who started. So I looked at Bitcoin in 2009 the first time.
Can you just tell the audience who he is, who Wences is?
Yeah, I'll go there in a second. But like I looked at Bitcoin the first time in 2009 when like the first white paper was published, etc. Because I'm a geek and I like to geek out on stuff, and I was in payments, so I really needed to learn about it. And then I was like, whoa, this is like really complicated. This is really, really geeky, even by my own geeky standards. And so I kind of dismissed it. I'm like, okay, it's kind of a toy. And then in 2011, Wences Casares, who is a fabulous entrepreneur, grew up in Patagonia, and has seen like the mismanagement of the Argentinian peso and what this had done to his family, and had stumbled upon Bitcoin and had like a massive aha moment. This is going to change the world. Before anyone else. He's often called patient zero of Silicon Valley Bitcoiners, which I think he definitely was. And it so turns out that we were already close friends then, and then he couldn't stop talking about it. And he's like, no, you don't understand. You have to invest the time to really understand Bitcoin fully. And it's going to take time and it's going to be painful, but like you have to invest the time to. And he had so much passion that that's when I really got back in, was in like 2011, like after I had dismissed it like a few years before. And so it was 2011. 2012 was also like a very important year for me because like I at the time I was running PayPal. And we had this moment where the Argentinian central bank asked us to stop basically just currency controls like put in place to avoid like money moving out of Argentina. And the day we did that, I could see Bitcoin price go up. And I'm like, okay, like there's like a real like use case for people on the ground that can't move money anymore. And they're seeking refuge with Bitcoin. And you could see it. And it's like, this is 2012, so it's still early. So this really hit it home for me, and I've never left Bitcoin land since then. And then, again, at Libra, the early days, we looked at building this on Bitcoin, but it's like there was no way to actually build a real-time payment system on top of Bitcoin for billions of people in 2018. And so we went another way, which didn't work. And so now I'm back to the basics.
Did you have any sort of ideological framework or background that you had bought into? Because a lot of people in this space, particularly the early Bitcoiners, the Austrian economics, anarchist capitalists, privacy advocates as well. So like, did you have some kind of political framework or ideology that made it easier for you to buy into Bitcoin?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a big freedom of speech guy. Increasingly so, actually, if it's possible, because I was already at the max, but like, I feel like it's really important that people have a voice and they're able to speak up. And I think that the same needs to be true for money. Like, freedom of money, freedom of transaction is, in my opinion, a human right. If you've worked.
Well, I'd taken that for granted all my life until COVID. And financial I knew financial services were kind of weaponized, but on the micro level as well towards citizens. Like I knew there were sanctions against countries and companies and whatever, but I'd never seen it turned on citizens en masse for literal political opinions.
100%. So I mean, look, the freedom of financial movement, freedom of money is, in my opinion, absolutely a human right. You've worked, you've put labor in, and the output of your labor is the money you've earned. This is yours. Yeah. It's not anyone else's. And so you need to be free to do whatever you want with that hard-earned currency or hard-earned money. And I think, gradually you're seeing more and more abuse. And like, a really good example of that for me, like, not that I needed more convincing because I was already there, but like, it's such an incredible moment, was when you had like this crazy trucker movement in Canada. And then, the Prime Minister Trudeau at the time basically started freezing the bank accounts, not only of the truckers, but of the businesses that were supporting the truckers by serving them coffee. They froze the bank accounts of these businesses. And I'm like, what is going on? And so that can't be, that you don't have like at a minimum, like, and I'm not part of the people that say, just burn it all down, right? Burn the whole financial system down. That's not my jam. But I think you need a really always present and available escape valve for people to actually exit the system if it behaves in a way that breaks this, basic human requirement that people have. And I think Bitcoin is the best invention for that ever when it comes to money.
David Marcus, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Before we go, is there anything else you want to share about your company? Anything else?
I think we covered so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah.